In a forgotten corner of West Africa, there was a village where time had lost its meaning. The village was called Koro. Koro sat surrounded by dry, barren land, but it was lush with secrets. In this village, the elders measured time by the dance of the sun across the sky, but no one had ever met someone who could change time or listen to it. No one except Kalifa. Kalifa was just 14 years old. His eyes held the kind of patience you'd expect from someone who spent a lifetime watching the sky. Since he was a child, he'd been having strange dreams, deserts covered in sand, rivers flowing backward, people walking in reverse. Every morning, his mother told him he'd been talking in his sleep. Kalifa was sure he was speaking to time in his dreams, but he never told anyone because in Koro, messing with time was considered a curse. One day, while wandering through the old graveyard outside the village, Kalifa found a small brass box buried in the dirt. When he opened it, there was a tiny hourglass inside. But this hourglass was like nothing he'd ever seen. Its sand flowed upward instead of down. Kalifa stared in shock. Inside the lid of the box were the words, "Time doesn't only move forward. Sometimes it brings you back." That night, Kalifa's dream was stronger than ever. He found himself in the past, but this time, he wasn't just watching. He could act. He stopped a little boy from dropping a jug full of water. He woke up with his heart racing, but the real shock came in the village square. That same boy from the dream was just about to drop his jug, and Kalifa stepped in just like in the dream and stopped it from falling. The dream had become real. The villagers thought he'd had a vision, and they praised him. But Kalifa knew it wasn't a vision. It was a pulling back. The hourglass had given him the power to twist time, but each time he used it, he noticed the sand inside moved faster. Time was giving him something, but it was also taking something away. Kalifa kept the hourglass a secret. He told only his grandmother, Mommy Fatutha, oldest living person in the village. She said she'd once heard stories of someone long ago who could talk to time. "If time has chosen you," she said, "then time will test you. But remember, you can't trick it." From that day on, Kalifa slept with the hourglass under his pillow, and each night, he'd wake up in a different moment. Sometimes it was a year ago. Sometimes he was holding the baby sister who hadn't even been born yet. Those moments were beautiful, but then he noticed something strange. The real timeline. It was starting to change. One day, an old man in the village Boubacar, who people believed could see the future, said to him, "Time isn't our enemy, son, but if we turn our backs on it, we'll lose our way." Those words struck something deep in Kalifa. Maybe this power was never meant to be his, or maybe it was meant for something much greater. One morning, Kalifa noticed something strange. The sand inside the hourglass had risen all the way to the top. It wasn't moving anymore, and just then, the wind began to blow. In the center of the village, a symbol appeared, something no one had ever seen before, the sign of infinity. That's when Kalifa realized this wasn't just a message, it was a calling, and it wasn't meant for him alone. Later that day, the villagers found the same symbol carved into the trunk of the old baobab tree on the edge of the village. It hadn't been there before, and no one had carved it. When Kalifa approached the tree, he heard a faint humming sound inside. He ran his fingers along the ridges of the carving, and suddenly flashes of images passed before his eyes. Wars, peace, love, heartbreak. Moments that had been, were happening, or hadn't come yet. That night, Kalifa didn't sleep. He sat there holding the hourglass. The sand was still frozen, but something inside him was whispering, "Time may be still, but you must keep walking." He didn't know where the voice came from, but its echo inside him felt like a command. The next morning, the villagers saw Kalifa at the ruins of the old temple, a place no one had visited for years. But with him there, it felt alive again. When he touched the stone walls of the temple, one of them suddenly gave way and collapsed inward. Behind it, there was a hidden chamber, its walls covered in ancient symbols of time. In the center stood a stone pedestal, and on it, a round disc. Written on the disc, in the old language of Koro, were the words, "He who knows the past shapes the future." The moment Kalifa read it, the disc began to glow. The entire chamber lit up with a soft, pulsing light. His eyes widened. Something was shifting. The disc moved slightly, almost like it recognized his touch. When Kalifa placed his hand on it, time itself seemed to pause. He could only hear one thing, his heartbeat, and then he heard a voice. "Choose a path, but know that every path comes with a price." In his mind, 3 paths appeared. The first, the power to change the past, but with every change, a memory would be erased. The second, the ability to see the future, but with each glimpse, a day from his life life would vanish. The third, the duty to protect time as it is but at the cost of suppressing his own desires. When Kalifa opened his eyes, the paths were still there in his mind. He had to choose. But which path was truly the right one? And what about you? If you were in Kalifa's place, which path would you choose? The three paths that had appeared in Kalifa's mind stayed with him for days. Each one was tempting, but also terrifying. What time had offered him wasn't just about his own fate. It could shape the future of the entire village. With that weight on his shoulders, Kalifa found himself back at the temple. The light on the disc had gone out, and the room was filled with silence. But the voice inside him was still there. "You can't move forward until you choose," it whispered. Kalifa thought maybe he'd already chosen the third path. To protect time just as it was, it seemed like the least harmful choice. But to do that, he would have to let go of his desires, maybe even the people he loved. When he touched the disc again, the stones trembled gently as if to say yes. A doorway opened from deep within the temple, one that only the guardians of time could enter. Kalifa stepped forward, walking into a dark tunnel. At the end of it, he came to a circular chamber, and there it was, a massive hourglass, suspended in midair. It flowed not by seconds or minutes, but by the stars in the sky. The grains of sand carried symbols as if each one held a story, a memory, a moment. Kalifa stood there, breathless. He was staring into the heart of time itself. Then, suddenly, an old woman stepped into the room. Her back was hunched, her hair silver, but her eyes bright as ever. "I am Luma, keeper of time," she said. "I've watched over this hourglass for centuries, but my time is ending. You're here because you were called." Kalifa bowed his head before he spoke. "Why me?" he asked. Luma slowly walked toward him and touched his forehead gently. "Because you're one of the rare ones," she said. "You can feel the past, imagine the future, and still protect the present. But don't forget, time doesn't serve you. You serve it." Kalifa tried to take in her words, but then the sand inside the giant hourglass suddenly sped up. Something was wrong. The rhythm of time had broken. Luma rushed to the hourglass. "Someone's tampering with time," she said. "And this isn't just about our village anymore. It threatens the entire world." Without thinking, Kalifa pulled out the little hourglass in his pocket. Its sand had started moving again, but this time it was flowing backward. It was a warning. Something he'd done in the past might have triggered a ripple, something unexpected. Luma looked at Kalifa's hourglass and let out a deep, steady breath. "Your time has become linked to this time," she said. "There's no turning back now." The next morning, Kalifa returned to the village, but nothing was the same. People were quieter. Animals seemed restless. Even Mommy Fatou looked at him like she didn't recognize him. By reaching into the past, Kalifa had changed something. Maybe just a small detail, but in the world of time, small things hide giants. That night, a great storm swept through the village. No one had seen weather like that in years. It felt less like nature and more like a warning. Kalifa started dreaming again, but this time, his dreams weren't just about the past. He saw what could be. In one vision, the village was dry, lifeless, forgotten by time. In another, Koro had become a temple of time itself. The path he'd chosen was already shaping the world around him. The next day, Kalifa went to see old Boubacar. Without a word, Boubacar handed him a book Kalifa hadn't seen in years. "This book tells the songs of time," he said. "Now it's your turn to hear them." Inside were ancient texts filled with the old knowledge of Koro, how to feel time, how to mend it. As Kalifa read, something opened in his mind. Time wasn't a line, it was a web, a fabric, and every touch wove a new pattern, patterns that shaped the fate of those who lived within them. Kalifa was no longer just a witness to time. He was someone who could weave it. In the middle of the night, Kalifa returned to the temple. With the book in one hand and the hourglass in the other, he stepped into the center of the chamber. "Time," he said. "I have a promise for you. I'll protect you. I won't break you. But to understand you, I have to live you." In that moment, the hourglass lit up. The disc turned once more, and something sparked in Kalifa's eyes. He had become the weaver of time. But with that power came something new. Kalifa began to see more than just his own thread in the timeline. During the day, he saw echoes of the past in people's eyes. At night, he heard the whispers of futures that hadn't happened yet. One evening, a strange man came to Kalifa's door. He handed him a small, weathered box. "This," the man said, "is for those who've forgotten the past." Inside was an old bone necklace. It didn't belong to Kalifa, but somehow it felt familiar. there. Soon, people in the village began to change. The elders started forgetting old memories. Children were having dreams of things that hadn't yet come to pass. Kalifa knew this was the result of time falling out of balance. The land of Koro now held cracks, wounds in the very fabric of time, and only knowledge and courage could mend them. So Kalifa called a great gathering in the village square. Everyone came. He laid out the ancient discs, the hourglass, and the book from the temple. And there, in front of the entire village, he shared the story of the weave of time, of how it lived, how it breathed, how it could break, and how it could heal. He taught them not just to measure time, but to feel it, to understand it, to protect it. After that day, the children started drawing circles in the sand time rings. The young began recording their dreams and bringing them to Kalifa. Women and men gathered in silence, meditating to sense time together. Koro was no longer just a village. It had become a school of time, but Kalifa knew it wasn't over. The sand in the hourglass still flowed the wrong way, and that meant another storm was coming. He remembered Luma's final words, "Time will transform you, but sometimes it will test you too." Weeks had passed since the people of Koro began learning time all over again. Everything in the village felt more connected, more aware. People no longer measured time only by clocks, but by the rhythm of their hearts. At night, children listened to stories written in the stars. And the elders, they began to question the meaning of each day a little more deeply. But deep inside Kalifa, something felt off. The hourglass still flowed in reverse, and his dreams were changing. Visions of the past were now tangled with disasters yet to come. Something was wrong. And Kalifa began to realize the source of that wrongness wasn't outside of him, it was inside. One night, in a dream, he saw his mother. But this dream was different. She showed him a place, a forest he had never visited, yet somehow felt familiar. "You have to go there," she said. "The answers begin with your birth." The next morning, Kalifa gathered his hourglass, the disc, and the book, and set off on the journey. Using a map he had found in Luma's time chamber, he followed its markings deep into the forest, toward an ancient temple once known as the Silent Keeper of history. The writings spoke of a place where time's forgotten face still whispered, where lost truths were said to speak again. The journey took days, and along the way, Kalifa was tested, body and mind. As he walked through the forest, the wind howled around him, but in its howl were echoes of the past. At night, he could almost hear the voices waiting for him inside the temple. And during the day, in the stillness of the woods, he listened closely to the beat of his own heart. Some nights, he dreamed of shadows circling a bone necklace at the temple's center. The shadows spoke of the burden of the past and asked him to question the very nature of time itself. When he finally reached the temple, the first things he saw were crumbled stones, faded walls, and long-forgotten carvings. But one symbol stopped him in his tracks: a three-eyed serpent, its tail in its mouth, and tiny grains of sand spinning around it, a symbol of time's cycle, an eternal loop. Every figure told a story. Every stone held a memory. In the middle of the temple, he found what looked like a stone lid half buried in the ground. When he lifted it, a soft light leaked out from beneath. He descended the stairs below, and there he entered a massive hall. In the center stood a large table surrounded by mirrors, and placed at the heart of that table was a bone necklace, exactly like the one from the stranger's box. When Kalifa reached for the necklace, a vision washed over him. He saw his mother not just as the woman who raised him, but as a guardian of time. Long ago, she had held the same responsibility Kalifa now carried, but over time, she let it go. And now he understood his deep connection to time wasn't random. Kalifa had been born with time. The very moment he came into the world, the skies had darkened, the winds had shifted, and hourglasses had begun to count backward. Kalifa wasn't a coincidence. He was someone chosen by time itself. Shaken by the truth, Kalifa stepped out of the temple and immediately felt that something was off. The sky was growing dark, faster than it should. Leaves were turning yellow even though it wasn't time for autumn. Time was losing balance. Kalifa realized this wasn't something he could fix with knowledge alone. It would take sacrifice. Knowing the past wasn't enough. He had to live it. He had to let things go. On his way back to the village, Kalifa stopped by a river. Staring into his reflection, he began to ask questions, not to the world, but to the time he carried within himself. Is this burden mine to bear, or am I just its messenger? He didn't get any answers, but something inside told him maybe the search for answers was the journey. When Kalifa returned to the village, there was a different look on his face, a blend of wisdom and exhaustion. The people gathered around him. Kalifa lit a great fire in the village square. He held the necklace and the map and threw them both into the flames. Knowing time is sacred, he said, but carrying its weight, it wears down the soul. This knowledge stays with me, but from here on out, the responsibility belongs to all of you. To understand time isn't just to see it, it's to feel it. That night, Kalifa was alone. The hourglass still flowed in reverse, but he had chosen a different path to restore it. In his spirit, he made a quiet promise. The future would no longer be shaped by his wisdom alone, but by the destiny his people would create together. In the stillness of the night, Kalifa returned to the village square. He stood alone, holding the hourglass in his hands, staring up at the stars. The sky had become a map to him, each star holding traces of the past and hopes for the future. But tonight, the stars were different. They shone brighter. They flickered faster. Time was getting ready for another transformation. People in the village had begun to stir. One by one, they emerged from their homes, drawn by something they couldn't explain. Kalifa stepped in front of them, raised the hourglass into the air and spoke. Time is speaking to us, but we won't just listen anymore. We're going to answer back. Those words lit a spark in every heart. From that moment on, change took root. Luma opened the time chamber to the villagers. Children stopped playing with hourglasses and started taking them apart to understand them. The elders began hosting storytelling nights, sharing their memories of time with the young, and the village of Koro became a community that no longer just measured time, they lived it. But for Kalifa, the journey wasn't over. That same night, under the stars, he walked alone into the forest. He followed the path his mother had once shown him. But this time, he wasn't carrying just an hourglass, he carried the hopes of his people and the wisdom of the past. Deep in the forest, he found a clearing he had never seen before. In the center stood a glowing stone circle, and at its heart a new time disk, trimmed in gold, shimmering with quiet power. Kalifa stepped forward and gently picked up the disk. As soon as he closed his eyes, he saw everything past, present, and future all at once, not as separate threads, but as one single breath. And this time, he wasn't just watching it, he was part of it. When he lifted the disk high, the sky lit up for a moment. Stars above spun into spiral formations around him. Time had taken shape. For the first time, before human eyes, Kalifa dropped to his knees and whispered softly, I'm not alone anymore. Time is with us. At that moment, the wind changed. Leaves rustled all in the same direction, and nature itself embraced Kalifa's transformation. The fabric of time had shifted, and now no one needed a guardian to remind them, because each person had become a weaver of their own time. When Kalifa returned to the village, the people waiting for him didn't need words. They saw the change in his eyes. He was no longer someone to follow out of duty. His words weren't commands, they were inspiration. Everyone began walking their own path, building their own time. And Kalifa, he didn't teach his wisdom like a teacher. He shared it. He didn't try to control time anymore. Instead, he chose to live with it as part of it. Over time, using the new time disk, Kalifa helped the village create new rituals. Every full moon, the people gathered beneath the great tree not just to remember the past, but to make choices for the future. These gatherings became sacred, a moment for reflection, a moment for direction. Then one day, a group of visitors arrived from a distant land. They had heard the legends of time and came to learn from Kalifa's journey. Kalifa welcomed them with open arms, and soon, the knowledge of time began to spread beyond the village, reaching lands far and wide. People came not just to witness, but to understand their own time, to discover their own cycles. One morning, as the sun rose, Kalifa sat quietly beneath the great tree. A small child approached and asked, Does time really talk? Kalifa smiled, took the child's hands, and replied, Time always speaks, but to hear it, you have to learn to listen to your own voice first. And just like that, the legend was complete. Kalifa was no longer just a figure in the village. He had become a light, and every new day was a step taken on the path he once walked.